Well, good morning again, everybody. Good morning. And it's wonderful to be with you. I had every intent to be back here worshiping on Sunday last week for Mother's Day. I missed it because my flight got delayed coming out of Nicaragua. And of course, the only flight that didn't get delayed was the one that went home to Springfield. And so I missed being with you all. I tried like heck to get here. And thankfully, I was able to call my friend Kayla in a panic and say, Kayla, you got to preach today. And so I gave her my sermon. And I said, make it your own. And she did wonderfully. And so I'm so proud to be. That gives me a lot of peace, let me just tell you, to know that I have people that I can call and they can help me in my moment of need. And we always knew that was on the table. I might not make it back, but turns out that's what happened. So I'm so glad to be back here with you and be worshiping with you and just welcome you into this space. However you got here, however you arrived, God receives you. Whether this is your first time or you've been coming for many times, God receives you and welcomes you with full open arms. The time in Nicaragua was fantastic. We had a great trip. It was myself with Nancy, our director of missions, wherever she went, and we had a few other. Nancy Beckwith is here. She was on the trip. Jim and Donna Thomason, and Jenny. Jenny was also with us, Jenny Reeve. So we all went, and we got to see the work that Rainbow Network does firsthand in Nicaragua. They work with rural communities. We got to see the community that we are helping to invest in, and I use that word intentionally. We are investing in the lives of people. So it's not just giving money. You're actually helping to invest in a future for people to give them access to things maybe they wouldn't have access to before. And it's a partnership and it's a relationship, and we come alongside them to help them in whatever they might need. So they work in rural communities. Our community that we're helping with is El Zapote. That's the name of the community. And we got to meet people, which I think was the best part. I've got a picture of just me and one of the kids. And I title my pictures fun things sometimes when I save them. And this is called Nicaraguan Flex. And you can see his arm actually covers up mine. So I feel like it's going to keep me motivated to maybe get in the gym someday. But meeting faces like this little boys, and we met so many people. I got to meet a student that I sponsor, or my family sponsors. His name was Francer. And so we have, through St. Paul's, I believe, 52 scholarship students that we sponsor, which is really an amazing feat to sponsor that many kids. We met all of them. We filmed videos with them. So if you're a sponsor of a child in Nicaragua, we met them, and we've got a video from them for you. So we're hoping to get that out to you really soon. But our strategy moving forward, working with El Zapote, is right now what they're doing is they're renting the places that they live. So they live in really not the greatest conditions. They're very happy. They don't know any different. But they're living in small houses. They're made out of brick, or like a mud brick with straw, and there's boards between them. Some of them are just tin houses, and multiple generations live in these homes. So there's a lot of people living in these small homes, and they rent them actually. So they don't own the land that they're living on, and they're renting the land and some of the houses. So it's very expensive. So when we come and help. We buy land, help them purchase their own land so that it gives them some margin on which they can live their lives. So the amount of hope that you see there in a lot of the people that you meet, it really is palpable. You can see what they're just hoping for a brighter future and for just a little bit of help. We met people who have received houses previously, and I tell you, they were giddy with excitement. And so we're just excited to go and be there with those people. The other thing that I will tell you is that we've already purchased the land. So back in December, we raised about $30,000 as a church, and we have purchased a plot of land. We're planning on that land to build about 11 houses. The original plan was 12. That's been bumped down to 11 just because that's the way it lays out best. So we're going to build 11 homes, and not everyone in the community is going to get a home. And while we were with them, we had to, that was talked about. A lot of the people who are in the community of El Zapote, they know we may not get a home, and if we don't, that's okay. We're going to be happy for the people that do. So, I mean, those conversations were being had, and they're just hopeful for what can be brought to the community. To kick off the project and begin construction, we won't begin until we raise all of the money, and so it's about another $35,000. Our hope is to begin using our relational capital. I think us raising $30,000 as a church, that is a significant contribution. That's a huge contribution. What I want to do now is just lean on our relational capital. So if you know a friend that maybe they don't go to a church, or maybe they would be hesitant just about giving to a church, but they would give to a project like this, or maybe it's a business or something like that, ask around and we can develop some of those partners. We would be proud and happy to put a name of a business or something that helped us sponsor this community. The other thing that we're looking at is even partnering with other churches. So those are some of the things that we can do to kind of push this project across the finish line and start building these homes for the people of El Zapote. So we're going to take some more trips in the future. If you've never been and you want to go, it is a fantastic trip. The terrain is rough, so be ready to walk on you're walking on rocks and gravel and hills and all sorts of stuff. But it is a great trip. So we're looking at kind of spring break time next year. So if you want to go, get ready to go. You'll have a great time. So today, we're going to talk about, we're starting a new series on the book of Esther. And this book, has anyone ever read the book of Esther before? It is a great read. I remember I was doing my reading plan. It was the Bible in a year. And it was boring, quite honestly. I was reading through whatever books were before. Some of these historical books, there's some good stuff in there, but some of it's a snooze fest. Yes, Teddy's like, oh yeah, it's a snooze fest. And that's okay. I think it's helpful to admit that up front. But the book of Esther, you get to it, and it is a compelling narrative. That story, it is fast-paced, and it's just, the stakes are high. This is a story that has espionage, so there's some spies in it. It's about politics. It's about power and patriarchy, and even things like, you see a lot of anti-Semitism and genocide. All of this stuff is on the table in Esther. And so you may be saying, well, look, we don't talk about that type of stuff in church. Well, Esther just dives right in. And so it's my hope that we can get into some of these things and we can begin to think about or build our stamina for how we might address some of the more controversial things we experience in life, even if it feels political or if it's about power or whatever it is. So Esther can help us do that. On the book of Esther, it's amazing that it even made it into the canon, the Bible. For me, because if you've not heard this before, just a bit of trivia, Esther does not mention the name of God at all. The name of God is not in the book of Esther. It doesn't mention or doesn't say the word God, nothing like that. So, but it's there, and what you can see is the characters in the story, they actually do rely on their faith to have the courage to stand in moments where they need to take a stand. So the faith is there. It features a couple prominent women figures in Scripture. So we're going to talk about Queen Vashti today and then Esther. It's the only book, it's only the second book that is actually named after a woman. So the other one is Ruth, and this one is Esther's, the second one. So we're going to read from the first chapter today, and in this chapter, just to kind of get your bearings here and get you situated, this is taking place in the Persian Empire, about 480, 460 BCE, under the rule and reign of King Xerxes. So if you've seen the movie 300, it's probably doesn't look quite like that, but it's King Xerxes. In the text, you'll hear Xerxes go by a different name. He goes by his Hebrew name. That's how they pronounce it. So it's Ahasuerus. Can you say that with me? Ahasuerus. I think that's right. And if I'm wrong, you can blame me, okay? So the Jews are also living in this land as foreigners. So they're foreigners in a strange land. And we're going to see this story unfold. Ahasuerus, Xerxes, is throwing this massive party to kind of as a sort of a display of wealth. So he's had a party that's gone on for 6 months long, and he is holding nothing back. He's invited all of his chief officials from across the empire of Persia into this, and towards the end of the 6 months, there's another party that's for everybody. If you're near the central location of the kingdom, everybody's invited. Doesn't matter how lowly you are in status or how high. Everyone is included in this. And the key characteristic of the party is there's no limit. We're just going to take as much as you want. You want some wine to drink as much as you want. You need something to eat, take it. And the king does this as a display of abundance and wealth, almost like saying, if you rely on me, I'll take care of you. I have it all. So that's where we pick up in the story. And we're going to be reading Esther chapter 1, verse 10, a few verses, and we'll get into it. So here are these verses from Esther. It says, on the 7th day, when the king was merry with wine, he commanded, you got to say these names with me. I thought this would be fun, so pronounce them with me. Just say it with authority. So he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcass. That was good. I think we did it. We nailed it. the 7 eunuchs who attended him to bring Queen Vashti before the king wearing the royal crown in order to show the peoples and the officials her beauty, for she was fair to behold. But Queen Vashti refused and came to come to the king's command, conveyed by the eunuchs. At this, the king was enraged, and his anger burned within him. I can feel that when I command my children to do something, I want them to do it. So what's happening here is the king is merry on wine. He's drunk, and he's asked his eunuchs to bring Vashti before him. Now, this is strange language for us. We don't quite understand it, but eunuchs were responsible for taking or overseeing the king's harem. So the king's harem is all of his wives, and the eunuchs were responsible for that. And they could do that, and they were trusted to do that because they were castrated men. So they were really viewed as kind of a different classification of person. They were eunuch. But eunuchs were highly thought of. A lot of people even sometimes wanted to be a eunuch because it gave them access to the inner courts of the king. And if you're close to the king, you can kind of live life well. So it was an esteemed position during this time. So the eunuchs, they go and they get Vashti and they tell her, hey, the king wants you to come forward to present yourself before everybody. And Vashti refuses. Remember, this whole party, it was this display of wealth and extravagance of possessions. And so the question to have Vashti come forward, or the command to have her come forward, was treating her like an object. That's what's happening here. So Vashti refuses. She won't be objectified, and this angers the king. And then we pick up in the story the response of the Persian Empire. I'm going to start be in verse 15. And Xerxes and his chief councils or chief officials, they get together and they decide, well, what are we going to do about Vashti? So here's what they say, verse 15. According to the law, what is to be done to Queen Vashti because she has not performed the command of King Ahasuerus conveyed by the eunuchs? Then Memucan said in the presence of the king and the officials, not only has Queen Vashti done wrong to the king, but also to all the officials and all the peoples who are in the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For this deed of the queen will be made known to all women, causing them to look with contempt on their husbands, since they will say, King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, and she did not come. This very day, the noble ladies of Persia and Media, who have heard of the queen's behavior, will rebel against the king's officials, and there will be no end of contempt and wrath. If it pleases the king, let the royal order go out from him. Let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes, so that it may not be altered, that Vashti is never again to come before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. So when the decree made by the king is proclaimed throughout all his kingdom, vast as it is, all the women will give honor to their husbands, high and low alike. And this advice pleased the king and the officials, and the king did as Memucan proposed. He sent letters to all the royal provinces, to every province in its own script, and to every people in its own language, declaring that every man should be master in his own house. So what happens here is the leaders, they get together and they talk about this awful thing that Vashti has done. And because she has denied the request of the king, it wasn't just done to the king, it was actually done to everybody. And because she did this thing, the word's going to get out. The other women in the kingdom are going to act in this way, in this manner, toward their husbands, and it's just going to be a lot of problems. So we need to cut this off immediately. So what they did is they made this law, this provision or decree, and they said all women should honor their husbands, and they said that husbands will be the masters of their own house. That was their kind of solution. And then they removed Vashti from her place of power. So to understand what's happening here, we have to understand power dynamics and the relational dynamics of what's going on. We see King Xerxes, who has the title of king. And you're supposed to do what the king says. Doesn't matter if you're queen or not. The king will rule over everybody. And there are times, I will tell you, when obedience is actually a good thing. I mentioned my kids earlier. Like, it's helpful to follow directions. I used to coach a lot of soccer, and it was helpful when the kids would follow the coach's direction and play together as a team instead of all going their different ways and like hanging on the goalpost and swinging and some of those things. If you've been employed at some place of work or employment, then your supervisor will have rules or expectations that you have to follow. And if you don't meet those expectations, you could potentially lose your job. And as long as those expectations are reasonable, it's like you need to be obedient to them, right? But title and position are not everything. You don't just have to obey what the king says because the king said it. And especially when she was being treated in this way, because to be asked to do what she was asked to do, it would make her subhuman. She was a possession. So Vashti refuses this humiliating and dehumanizing request, and that refusal actually kind of flips the script a little bit. It turns the tables of power. The king now has to then make a choice. He's got to figure out, what do I do? If we ignore this and leave her alone, I'll appear weak. If I kill her or execute her, which is definitely on the table for this time period, then I might appear cruel. So they come up with this law, but what it does, and we'll see this later in the story, is that Queen Vashti's refusal actually paves the way for Esther to enter in. If someone else can do this, I can too. So Vashti has this moment of, it's like a peaceful, nonviolent resistance that she does in the story. And sometimes when this happens in our world, what we will do is we will confuse these types of actions as maybe a source of division. But what I want to tell you today is we should never think that claiming our dignity as people or asking someone to see us as fully human, I don't care if anyone agrees with you or your life or anything, but to ask someone to see you as a human created by God, you should never feel bad about that. That is not divisive. In fact, Jesus actually talks about this kind of strategy here. In a Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, he says this. He said, "You've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. If anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also." So in Jesus' day, what was very common is if you didn't like someone or they're of lower status than you would take your right hand and you would backhand them. And they would hit you. So for me, if someone would hit me, it would be across this cheek. And to receive a backhand, it was an insult. It was a slight. It didn't just hurt physically. It meant that you were less than. So what Jesus was asking people to do, he said, you actually turn the other cheek so that they cannot backhand you anymore. They actually have to hit you with an open palm. And when you do that, now you're in a fight. And now the person has just said that you're my equal. So by turning the other cheek, it doesn't just mean that you can keep abusing me and hitting me. It actually is a form of resistance so that the other person will see your full humanity. They have to make a choice. You flip the scripts of power. They see you as human. They have to offer you dignity. So when we're talking about dignity, a lot of times I think the place to start is it begins with us. You and I, we know ourselves better than anyone else. We know all of our flaws and our weaknesses. I, at times, have to be really careful about my own self-talk. Does anyone else struggle with their self-talk? Like, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, whatever. When you say those types of things, you actually rob yourself of your own dignity. And so if we want to claim dignity, especially in some of these precarious situations out in the world that we might find ourselves in, if we want to be able to stand so that someone else has to acknowledge our humanity, we actually have to claim our dignity for ourselves. We have to claim the fact that God has created us in God's image. And when we claim that dignity for ourselves, it can give us the courage to stand. A lot of times, the way it will look like putting your best foot forward in all things. Regardless of what someone else says or does or thinks or believes about you, putting your best foot forward and doing the work or remaining composed, doing the best that you can in any situation, you can maintain your dignity. And the other person, maybe they'll reveal themselves to be whatever they are, but when you put your best foot forward, you make a statement. You're saying, I'm maintaining my dignity today, and I want you to see me for who I am. And when you believe in yourself, and when you believe in who God made you to be, when people come to take that dignity away from you, you can stand. I want you to know today, Psalms 139, it tells us this, for it was you who formed me in my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. I know that very well. I want you to say this in your mind. You can say it out loud if you want, but I want you to say this in your mind just to yourself for a moment. I am God's child. I want you to claim your dignity, this God-given dignity. Claim your uniqueness and claim your awesomeness that God has put in you. And whatever anyone tries to say about you, or what the world tries to say you, they cannot take away your dignity. Only you can give that away. And in the story of Vashti, we see her claiming it herself. And when she does that, it actually makes it possible for others that follow to do it. We're going to read about Esther here in the weeks to come. And without Vashti, there's no Esther. When you claim your dignity, people will see themselves, or at least a part of themselves, in you and in your story. So it doesn't even matter, I believe, it doesn't even matter if you do it for selfish reasons. Like Queen Vashti, maybe she wasn't so aware and she was fighting against this patriarchal, misogynistic culture. Maybe she was just like, I'm not willing to do this. But by her standing, she makes it possible for others to stand. But when we claim our dignity, you have to be prepared for the backlash that ensues. We read about that here, and we saw what the empire did. They're like, we have to do something about this. We have to quell this. We have to stop this. Things actually didn't get better. They got worse, which is kind of disheartening, right? They actually got worse. And I imagine that Vashti received it from all sides. She got removed from power, her place of privilege, and she no longer had voice with the king. Someone else took her position as queen. They put these new laws on the book. So think about even the women in this culture and society. They're like, Vashti, why did she have to do that? She's now making it worse for us. Can you imagine what it would have been like getting it from all angles and sides? But she walked away with her dignity. See, justice and movements of justice and equality, you have to start somewhere. There has to be a first. And in the story of Esther, it's Vashti. One of my favorite people, all-time people, I'm a big baseball fan, is Jackie Robinson. And if you know anything about Jackie Robinson, if you've read any of his story, he's this amazing human being. He was the first black man to play baseball. He helped integrate Major League Baseball. He also grew up in California as a Methodist. Did you know that? I don't think that really continued on, but I kind of like that he grew up as a Methodist. So Jackie Robinson, during his lifetime, he really committed himself to just claiming his own dignity. And just by showing up at the ballpark, when he would arrive at the stadium and there were doors that were locked and the team that they were playing was saying, we're not going to play, he would show up anyway and he would be there. And amidst insult and just some of the hateful rhetoric that he would have experienced, he did his best. He wasn't perfect in this, but he tried to never lash out. His strategy was, I'm going to be the best baseball player you've ever seen. And this guy was like a terror on the base paths. He was amazing. And over time, people began to see, oh my gosh, this guy belongs. This guy belongs here. He's got this great quote about dignity, which is where I want to end. He says, the most luxurious possession, the richest treasure anybody has is his personal dignity. And that's given to you by God. And no one can take it away. Would you pray with me? Holy God, we give you thanks today just to stand in your presence. So often we feel unworthy to even be here, but you continue to invite us back in because of your amazing grace. God, fill us with your Spirit. Help our hearts and our minds and even the depths of our soul focus on you and claim that promise that you have told to us. that we are yours, and that we are loved. Give us the peace and the patience to face those times when we ourselves or even the world would want to take our dignity from us. And God, give us eyes to see the humanness and the beauty in another. God, we're going to try our best to give freely and fully of ourselves to you as you have done to us. Now and each day forward. We ask all this in Christ's name, and everyone here says,